Hello, and a very warm welcome to this webinar for People Management, brought to you in partnership with Rise Up. I'm Abbie Dawson, Deputy Editor at People Management, and today we'll be talking about how the traditional push approach to work, to learning and development, may no longer be fit for purpose. An approach called learning in the flow of work advocates that for continuous learning to happen, the learning resources must be available within the employee's workflow. In practice, this means as employers encounter a task-related challenge at work, they can access the information on how to solve it there and then, setting them off in a learning journey that aligns with their workflow. We'll have a couple of polls running throughout the session, so please do take part in those. They should be just below me on the screen. The first poll is just a temperature check, so we can see where everyone's at and what people are looking to get from this session. So if you could answer whether or not you're familiar with the learning in the flow of work, that'd be great. And then there's another poll asking how you are integrating learning into the workday at your organisation. So I've got three wonderful expert speakers with me who'll be sharing some of their insights on the topic. First, Maureen Silla, if you could please introduce yourself.
Hi, hello. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation. So just a quick word about myself. So I have a university degree in biology and competitive intelligence. And I've been working in the learning and development domain since 2015. And I joined the Optiven group 1 year ago as their digital learning manager. Just a quick word about Optiven. So Optiven is a European leader in automotive and mobility service contracts. So we offer insurance and maintenance programs, and we also provide roadside, medical, and home assistance. So I'm in charge of the implementation and development of our training strategy. So I manage the selection and integration of the Rise Up learning platform into our Microsoft Teams account. And I'm also responsible for creating digital training modules, redesigning the onboarding training path for our newcomers. And I also support our trainers because we have many trainers in different departments in building their blended learning courses.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Next we have David Hayden. Could you please introduce yourself, David, and tell us a little bit about your role?
Thanks, Abbie. Yes, so as I say, my name is David Hayden. I am a learning content manager, one of 3 learning content managers at the CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. If there are any CIPD members on the call, you may well have accessed our Learning Hub and accessed the Essential Insights courses and the Core Behaviours introductory programs aligned to our profession map. Well, my role is to commission and to design
Oh, I think we might just have a slight technical hitch here. Hopefully David will come back on the screen.
I'm also responsible for the 10 learning and development fact sheets that the CIPD produce as well. So that's me.
Brilliant. Hopefully everyone got that. I don't know if it was just me, but that went halfway through. But hopefully everyone got that. Thank you so much, David. And finally, Michelle Parry-Slater, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Hi everybody, it's great to be with you. Thank you for inviting me. I am the founder and L&D director at Kairos Modern Learning. We are a small consultancy business which specialises in sort of strategic approaches to L&D, shifting people away from sort of traditional thinking of only courses and face-to-face and moving into social and digital learning. I'm also author, got to get a plug in, of the Learning and Development Handbook. In the same stable from Kogan Page as David's book as well, and our lovely friend Andy Lancaster from CIPD too. And yeah, really happy to be talking today about learning in the flow of work.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So we'll be hearing from our panellists in just a moment, and we'll also be taking questions from you, the audience, at the end. So please do pop those in the comment box below and I'll get round to as many as I can. We'd also like to ask you another question, get you involved as much as possible. So could you please share the challenges that you're facing in fostering a culture of learning within your organisation? Again, if you just use the comment box that's below the video player, I will have a look at those too. Okay, so We will start by discussing what a learning in the flow of work approach is, in case people aren't too familiar with it, and why it might be a better L&D approach than more traditional methods such as corporate learning portals. Maureen, perhaps you could start on that one.
Yeah, sure. So here, it's when we compare to a traditional learning, people don't, because again, we are using our LMS platform into our team's account. People don't have to leave what they do to go learning, because the learning is brought into their job. So on a very concrete, and here we'll be very concrete today with you, on the very concrete point of view, the collaborators do not have to remember any link to their LMS, or do they have a login or password? Do they have to go through a VPN or whatever? On the platform, they will have what the training they need and exactly what they need because of their job and their department, and they definitely know what we expect from them. This is what how I use it in my company.
Brilliant. Michelle, anything to add to that?
The opportunity for people to not be interrupted in the workflow is absolutely crucial. People in their private lives don't wait. You know, you want to cook Mexican food, you go onto YouTube, you find a recipe for Mexican food and it's done. And I think that behavior, that habit of instancy is hugely important. And we can't really make people wait for 6 months to go on a course anymore. That's just not acceptable. It's not only productivity, but it encourages workarounds. And we end up with the L&D department being less important because people will find a workaround. So I think that we've really got to focus in on how can we make learning in the moment as easy as possible for people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. David, could you kind of go on and further explain what learning in the flow of work is and why it might be a better approach in your opinion?
Sure. Yes. So fingers crossed that the Wi-Fi holds out for me. So look, learning in the flow of work is one approach that, as learning development professionals, we've got to help meet performance needs within our organisation. So it's important to remember it's one approach. We're not saying necessarily it is more superior or less superior to anything else. It's around using the right tool for the right approach. It's really important thinking around learning the flow of work around how that links to performance, and we can get to performance solutions quicker with learning in the flow of work. It's got a really kind of rich history. So Josh Burstein's widely accredited with coming up with the title in 2018. But if we look beyond that, you've got people like Bob Mosher, you've got people like Gloria Jerry who have had a massive contribution. And if you think about it, there are elements of learning in the flow of work that go way back with apprenticeships to some of the apprenticeship approaches. Some of the traditional apprenticeship approaches have got elements of learning in the flow of work within that. So whilst it may be a new phrase for us, some of the elements are not new in and of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So sticking with you there, David, there's a CIPD fact sheet that lists 10 shifts that are taking place in L&D, and it states that there are clear opportunities for professionals to embrace these shifts. Can you tell us a little bit more about that research and findings?
Sure, yes. So it's scary. That research goes back to 2014, and the CIPD commissioned a company that was around then called Towards Maturity, and we wrote this report called New Challenges, New Opportunities, and rereading that report as part of research for this, it's like, wow, some of those words we wouldn't use today. However, some of the challenges that are around are even more heightened today than they were in 2014. So we've done a raft of research. We commissioned Towards Maturity to do a few pieces of work for us, and out of that came this concept of 10 shifts, which Michelle's mentioned. Andy Lancaster. Andy Lancaster is the head of the external facing CIPD learning team, and he coined the phrase 10 shifts. Well, he was the first person I heard say the phrase 10 shifts. What looked at 10 areas that we really need to embrace thinking about our relationship with things like our alignment to the business, things like our relationship with measurement, thinking about our relationship with content creation and thinking around our relationship with the research we do and how we role model learning. So yeah, that's where 10 shifts came from. And one of those shifts was, how do we get better at accessing learning at the point of need in the flow of work, not necessarily being disruptive and taking people away from work.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I'm just going to have a quick look at the poll results that our audience has been voting in. It's good to see that you're so engaged already. So in terms of people being familiar with learning in the flow of work, we've got 44% have said no. So hopefully you'll get something from this webinar. We've got 27% yes and 28% somewhat. So hopefully you've all got something to learn from this, and you can take things back to your own organisations. Okay, so sticking with some CIPD research, researchers found that over 3/4 of L&D professionals feel their organisation's senior leaders still prefer a more traditional L&D offering and are blockers in moving to a future-focused approach. So how do L&D professionals go about making the business case for new practices? Michelle, perhaps you could start with that one.
This is so crucial. We've really got to be advocates for the right solutions at the right time for the right people in the right way. And so we need to start with our evidence base. Traditionally, somebody's come to us and said, you know, we need to go on a course, and they may have evidenced that, for example, through their performance review with their team. But we need to be a little bit more questioning about, well, why, exactly what it is that the problem is. So traditionally, just taking it at face value is no longer good enough. We need to be really close to our businesses to understand their strategy, and that's where our learning solutions actually start. What is the business trying to do? If you go to your blockers with the evidence of, this is our business strategy, this is how L&D can help with that and why, actually it's an easier sell. You're not pushing water up a hill anymore. You're actually trundling alongside with somebody who's trying to do the same thing. And this is why I say earlier, you know, people will find other ways. They're not going to wait for you in L&D. They're going to actually find a way that suits them. And so if you're providing them with solutions which suit them, you know, which make that easier. One of the 10 shifts, for example, is a move from creation to curation. Curation being gathering all that stuff that's everywhere. There's so much information out there. You know, I mentioned Mexican food. Go on YouTube. This is so typical. These are the behaviors that we have. So if the L&D team can start to curate, so instead of going to the vastness of the internet to find the information, your teams, your staff, your employees, whatever you're calling them, your blockers even, can come to you as the L&D team and say, you know, I've got this issue. Help me solve it, and you're curating some content that's already out there. What an easy win for them. You're making their life easy, and who doesn't want their colleagues to make their life easy?
Absolutely. Maureen, do you have any advice for L&D professionals looking to make a good business case for these practices?
Yes, sure. Actually, I like Michelle's word about evidence. This is exactly what we do at Optiven, because well, this project at Optiven is quite new, because I told you that I arrived like last year. So we launched this project a couple of months ago, and it's quite new. And I know that it will take a certain time shifting from this traditional learning to this new way of learning, and it takes time and change management. But what is key on my side is communicating to the managers, actually, because we always communicate of what we did, and the evidence is all the return on experience that we made, and all the experience we made in some departments, and communicating about that to the other managers. It makes them want to do this in their departments. So it's very concrete results, and it actually is pushing them implementing this way of learning in their departments. So this is what we did in France, but actually it's because we started with Optiven is based in Lyon. Should have started with this, based in Lyon in France. So, but we also have affiliates in Europe, and now that we started in France, we have affiliates who want to do this in their countries as well. So again, the evidence shows everybody that it's this new way of training is a good way of training.
Absolutely. And David, any advice from you?
Yeah, so sticking with the evidence theme, let's play back. So if someone's coming along and saying, look, I need a course for my team, we need to think around, well, what is our usual lead-in time? If we're going to do it with a traditional approach, what is our usual lead-in time? So over the past 2 years, our lead-in time to get something in front of your team will take us X number of weeks, or maybe even months, or in some cases it may be years. You know, I've known some leadership programs wait years to be launched. So how important is this performance need for your team? Well, you're asking me for it, so it's pretty important. So we need to get something there quite quickly. Can you actually wait that amount of time to get a traditional course? So let's spin some of that evidence. So not only is the evidence in learning and development saying learning in the flow is one of those things that can help speed up performance, but let's look at some of the things we do traditionally. And also, I think it's around, so Josh Burstein talks about a paradigm shift in thinking. So if a paradigm shift means we've got to really move our understanding of what our approach is. So if your learning team is based on designers and deliverers, and that's all they do, design and deliver, you've got to rethink with your team, we're going to do some things differently, and how up for you as a team are you for doing that difference? Because you've got to break that mold. You've got to move from your current paradigm to a new paradigm to be able to embrace some of this. So yeah, it's not just about nodding when someone comes along and says, I want a course. It's around challenging why they want the course, but also challenging your own team as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I'm just going to go back to the question that we asked our audience about challenges that they were facing in developing a learning culture. We've got staff having enough time to complete learning, encouraging colleagues to move away from traditional methods. Not everyone has access to a PC. There are all sorts of challenges that people are coming up against here. Do any of you have any advice for them? David?
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to get in before Michelle gets in, because I know Michelle will say something about start small. So yeah, kind of get that in, but also think a little bit creatively as well. So yeah, not everyone's got a PC, but think about some of the options you may have around that. So one of the names people may know on this call, Andrew Jacobs. If you don't know, then look up Andrew Jacobs. Andrew Jacobs has done a huge amount of work in this space. And for a group of employees in one of his organizations, he actually bought an iPad to give to that team so they could access some learning in the flow that actually speeded up massively getting new drivers on I think it was refuse trucks was the context he was talking about. So instead of making people wait before they could drive a different type of refuse truck, he got an iPad to that team, and they were able to do it really, really quickly. So just be a little bit creative. Don't immediately think, no, people haven't got people haven't got PCs. What is it we can do more creative with our budget to get that learning to that team really quickly? But yeah, sorry, Michelle, start small as well. Sorry. Yeah.
Michelle, do you have anything to add?
Oh, this is right in my wheelhouse. It is all about being practical. I mean, I wrote the book called The Practitioner's Guide for a reason. It's all well and good us talking about this stuff, but talking about it is not going to help people on this call today. So let's look at some practical applications. You know, we've just had one example there from David about if you've not got PCs, you might not need them. Sometimes a paper checklist is what people need. They need a job aid. They need something to be able to follow. If you think about pilots on an aeroplane, they have it in their head, but they're mentally following through a checklist. And if a pilot can do that and land a plane safely every day, all day, every day, then it's good enough for everybody. You know, don't dismiss, don't think it needs to be technical. It doesn't always need a technical solution. It can just be a paper solution or a job aid or something like that. Similarly, there was the comment about not enough time. Now, this is about investment of productivity. If we're running and running and running and running and running, we'll eventually burn out and keel over and stop. At some point, people who are wise in business know that you invest in your future self. Okay, you invest in your future self by making sure that you have got what you need to get there. If you don't do any development, any learning at all, you'll only ever be standing where you are today. And so anybody in my client base that says, you know, we're really short on time, this is just another thing to do, and therefore we're not considering it to be of value, it's L&D's job to demonstrate the value that we bring. And therefore, when you consider learning in the flow of work, making it as easy as possible for people to find that time. You know, not to harp on about Andrew Jacobs again, but Andrew had zero budget. You are incredibly creative when you've got no budget. I work with a lot of third sector organizations, and they've also got very minimal budgets, and they do a lot more creative stuff than our corporate colleagues, because our corporate colleagues think we've got to throw money at it. So actually what Andrew did was, you've taken away all my money, you need to give me time. And he negotiated 5%, I think it was, of everybody's time to invest in learning and development. And that way he's then curating and giving people library cards, you know, to access material that will help them do their jobs better. And the example that David gave about buying a piece of technology, that was offset about the increased productivity, the shortening of the onboarding process where people are being unproductive, and it's costing businesses money. So think carefully about time and cost and investing in your future self.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'd just like to remind everyone that's watching that we will be getting to audience questions a little bit later on. So if you have got anything that you'd like to ask our speakers, then please do pop those in the comment box below the video. Maureen, do you have any examples of how learning in the flow of work actually works in practice? Any case studies that you could potentially share with us?
Sure, with pleasure. So I will share with you today 2 case studies. So first of all, just so you have a macro view, we decided at Optivin to integrate our learning platform into Microsoft Teams accounts only. So meaning that the collaborators don't have no access today to any online platform. It is all integrated into the Microsoft Teams. This is our actually internal digital strategy for the e-learning, of course, but our intranet is always also on Microsoft Teams, our SharePoint database, all the quality documents. Because again, if we don't want them to go learning, we want them to have the learning into their daily tool. So my first case study is linked to a regulation training. So we had to train 900 collaborators in France on the GDPR legislation. So we all know that this kind of training can be quite boring. So the training program was compulsory. It was composed briefly, I'm just explaining briefly, it was composed by 4 short modules. Each one had a cartoon video plus a quiz that we could take again and again if they wanted. Each module was very short, so maximum 10 minutes each, and the objective score was 75%. So concretely, our collaborators had to follow the training into their Microsoft Teams accounts. Again, they didn't have to log in. They were directly recognized because they were part of Optivin ecosystem. So it's great and very easy for them. And because they use already Microsoft Teams daily, so for us, it's relevant to be where the learners are. And for them, it's easy. They know where their training is. So they had the choice either to follow one module at a time or to binge watch the module like on Netflix, for example. And so regarding the results, so after 2 months, more than 72% of the collaborators completed the training, which is a very good I thought it was very good because it's the first online training they ever got at Optivin. So 72% of completion is great. The average score were up to 90%. And they really enjoyed the training. Everybody told me that it was short and fun and easy to find. So for everybody, it was very engaging. On my side, what I learned actually, we needed to promote this way of training to the managers because nothing is possible without the managers' push. So because at Optivin, we have 2 types of collaborators. We have some collaborators who can organize their time and some others have a planning. So for them, we had to dedicate specific slots in their agenda to be trained, actually. Because if they're it's like the drawback of any e-learning, if they're in front of their computer, they seem available. So we definitely explained to the managers that they had to block some time for them to do the training. Again, the communication is really, really important. As I was saying earlier, we communicated before the training, during the campaign, after. At Optiven, we have a club for the managers. So I used the club to communicate about the results and to motivate people doing it. And also we communicated about everything about the campaign to all the collaborators everywhere I could, actually, on the intranet. And we have big TVs everywhere in the company. So I put the results on the big TVs as well. So people really knew that there was a training at the moment and how they could access it. And we were talking just before about the computers, for example. Not everybody had a computer. It's something everybody at Optiven have a computer. But for example, some people had no sound cards on their computer. So this is something different between when you are in a class, you are okay with your material, you know it. Here, I had different types of computers, and apparently some have no sound cards. So I had to avoid any material, any modules with a voiceover, for example. This is something I learned from this experience. My second case study is really interesting because it was not something pushed by myself, but it's a training launched by another trainer. And this regarding a new contract. So actually, it's a specific department, and they are used to deliver trainings, but in a very traditional training, in a class with PowerPoints and oral quizzes. So here, for this new contract, we created a blended program with modules delivered on RiseUp, on Teams, and quizzes to play and learn. So this training is dedicated to specific collaborators of a specific department, and we will eventually, we started like 10 days ago, we will eventually train 75 collaborators this way. So the trainers really enjoyed training this way because they lose less time repeating it again and again, their training, and it's easier to assess people. On the other hand, the collaborators find it very easy and engaging because it's already on their Teams accounts. And because on their Teams, it's linked to the Active Directory of the company. So only these 75 people can see this training. And we were going to leave this training into their catalog so they can come back later on if they need. So, and here again, the communication is very important. And I had to, and also the push of the managers, of course, these department managers. And I also communicated about this project to, of course, these collaborators, but to the other managers. And now I have other departments managers who come to me and say, okay, Maureen, I want to implement this way of training as well in my department, which is very, well, it's good for me because they can see the impacts. A quick word regarding the engagement. Having the LMS platform integrated into our Teams accounts is increasing the engagement as the training is easy to find, and they directly know what they need. The collaborators directly know what they need to do, what is online, and it's linked to their department or their job. And on my side, on the learning and development point of view, I can display different types of content. I have SCORMs, of course, but I have videos, I have links, such as Genially. I don't know if you know this tool, but it's an amazing tool to create fun trainings. So just two last words. Our next step is to redesign our onboarding training path. So again, one part will be hosted on Microsoft Teams with modules available from day one, but we will also keep a face-to-face training because we like having this face-to-face training when people arrive and they don't know the company and they need it. And we want to give this belonging sense, and we need to keep the face-to-face training for this objective. So just to finish, my objective at Optiven is to spread a learning culture with this corporate learning for everybody, with our onboarding modules about our values, compliance modules, but also technical learning depending on the job, and transversal learning with soft skills modules. So this is the objective of next year.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing those with us. I feel like it's always helpful to get real life examples. So thank you for those. So we spoke a little bit about some of the barriers our audience are telling us that they're facing towards creating a learning culture in their organisation. And one of the main barriers that they're facing is not just a lack of buy-in from the senior leadership team, but from other colleagues too, who say they don't have time to invest, they're too focused on day-to-day tasks, and they see learning as an add-on. Do you have any suggestions on how to make learning a priority for organisations? David, perhaps you'd like to start.
So learning is happening in organisations every single day. That has nothing to do with the learning and development team. You've only got, if people are in the office, you've only got to look around the office and see people talking to each other. Learning's happening there. There's been an incredible amount of learning happened in organisations that have been working from home since March 2020. Michelle and I were talking about it just before this call. If you think about Microsoft Teams, Maureen's mentioned Microsoft Teams quite a few times, but Microsoft Teams has evolved and evolved and evolved. So actually, if people are using Microsoft Teams, it's very different to what it was in March 2020 to what it is today. Zoom is different to what it is today to what it was in March 2020. People have been learning every single upgrade without going on a course. So actually we need to play back and say, hang on a minute, you have been learning. This is all changed. Our organizations have responded in very different ways to the pandemic. People have been learning every single day. So we need to replay that back, and we need to say, right, how can we help you accelerate? Because you have been learning in the flow of work. You've been doing this. What we can now formalize some of this with some other stuff to do. So yeah, play it back to people to say, you have been doing it.
Yeah. Maureen, do you have anything to add to that? Any suggestions on how our audience can make learning a priority?
Well, it's a great challenge. From myself, I think we need to. I definitely agree with David. People have been learning every day, and for example, at Optiven, we have this culture of oral learning. People are very used to go to the colleagues when they have a question before going to their trainer. So it's great, and that's one thing is that I really want the people, like the experts, to be creating their own modules. So it's for everybody, it will be like a motivation to watch these modules because it's been created by somebody like them, working in the same place and doing the same job. So for me, the priority is to find a way of motivating them, giving them sense in their daily job, giving them access of what they need. I definitely agree with Michelle with this curation topic. And I will really also think that we need to give access to soft skills training as well, that they can use in their job, but they can use it as well in their daily, life.
Yeah, absolutely. Michelle, do you have any advice for our audience on this one? Oh, Michelle, you're on mute.
Of course I am. Sorry about that. It's not a real session, is it? Unless we've had somebody on mute. That's part of the thing, isn't it? We've got to learn as we go. I've switched my technology from Microsoft over to Apple, and my goodness me, it's a tricky one. You know, I'm not even bought in myself, and I bought the technology. So how do we motivate people to actually give their time to learning? For me, it's about understanding the value, and it's also about role modeling. If we don't see our leadership team celebrating that they've learned something, or showing their vulnerability that they don't know something, they learn it and now they do know something, why should we bother? Why should we as an individual, worker in a factory give two hoots about whether I know how to use that machine or this machine? I'm just happy doing my job. So for me, it is definitely about the kudos of knowledge sharing. In the past, knowledge has equaled power. If I have knowledge, I can get a promotion, and I can demonstrate I'm better than the next person, and therefore I can go for the next job. And hierarchical structures enable that to continue. Whereas we start celebrating, you've been on a the course, great, come back and share that with the rest of the team. Or you've learned how to use your iPad, come and share how you use your iPad with other people. The kudos and the power, therefore, shifts away from holding the knowledge to yourself, and it actually moves towards sharing being the value. And when we get to that stage, it means that we are no longer, from an L&D perspective, we're no longer, just the people that do compliance. I mean, I was with Andy Lancaster the other day, and he said, give compliance to the auditors. They want to count the stuff. We want to celebrate the fact that the understanding of what does it mean when you do your anti-bribery and corruption training lands in the audience. What does that mean to the work? Well, it means that, I know that I'll keep this company safe, and I won't accidentally take some Wimbledon tickets when I shouldn't really have them. It's the application, and it's really making it real for people. How does this add value to my everyday life? And once we start celebrating that, once we start saying, great job. There's a podcast out there for people, Mind Tools podcast, and they always end with, what did I learn this week? And I think that's a great thing that we could do in all of our team meetings. Just start celebrating, what did we learn this week? Well, I had a really terrible call with a customer. They were really shouting at me, and I managed to calm them down. This is what I did. Fantastic. Social learning in action, people learning from people in action in your workplace. Not a formal learning and development person in sight, but we're the people that need to be spreading that word, advocating for that as a good solution, getting that out there. This is learning in the flow of work in action.
Brilliant. Some great words of wisdom there. And you're right, we should be celebrating the things we've learned. Okay, so I'm going to move on to audience questions now. But just before I do that, I'm just going to reveal the results of the second poll that we set off at the start of this session. So we asked, how are you integrating learning into the workday in your organisation? And 63% of our audience said they are encouraging knowledge sharing. 13% are incorporating learning into tools used on a daily basis. 11% were assigning tasks to develop learning by doing, and 10% are using micro-learning. So really interesting. And if you haven't yet responded to our polls, then please do. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, so lots of questions have come in, which is brilliant. Thank you for sending those in. So someone has asked, how would you provide training to those on the autism spectrum or someone with a learning disability? Dyslexia seems to be a wide challenge with working adults in the councils nowadays. Please advice. Does anyone have anything they can say on that one?
There's a fantastic book by Susie Miller on accessibility. I'd definitely recommend that for a read. But I'd also just say, ask people. Yeah. Ask people, what would help you? Would it be that we need to write this down? Sometimes it helps if somebody is neurodivergent that they own part of the experience. So instead of being told, this is how you do it, this is the checklist, this is the video, this is the asset that you need to learn, rather be involved in that, so that then the learning and development professional can learn the best for that individual. We do need to treat people as individuals and personalise. And you may be saying, well, that's easy for you, Michelle. You don't have 10,000 in your workforce. Actually, it can be done if you simply ask people. I used to be head of learning at Girl Guiding in a voluntary capacity. We had over 100,000 volunteers, and a lot of people across a broad range of age and spectrum and neurodivergence. And I can definitely guarantee asking people.
Brilliant, thank you. Someone else has asked, how do you deal with the challenges of a multi-generational workforce and those who are not as digitally literate as, for example, millennials within the workforce? So how can you improve accessibility and inclusion? David.
Yes. So first of all, let's not assume that one generation has the skills and one generation doesn't. My kids are in their late 20s, early 30s, and they have no idea around social media, around Twitter. I even had to remind them that they can Google stuff. So, I say to them often, there's this thing called Google. Also, millennials are from around about the age of something like 19 to 31. When I was 31, I didn't want to be in the same bracket as a 19-year-old. So, yeah, first of all, let's dispel the myth that only one generation is digitally active. The biggest users of Facebook are what's called silver surfers. So we need to stop kind of stereotyping that. So yeah, and also along with that is technology is not intuitive. So regardless of all this stuff you read about intuitive technology, Michelle's shared a bit of her Apple journey. It's not intuitive that the app button is in a different space to the speech button on an Apple keyboard compared to a Microsoft keyboard. So if we're asking people to do something through technology, why not spend some time saying, here's the top 3 tips on this piece of kit? Or if you're inviting someone to an online session and you think it's the first time they've been on it, say, right, we'll start 15 minutes early just to get use of the controls. So just think around what steps can you put in to help people. And if people turn up, great. If they don't, then you can assume that they know the technology. But let's not stereotype people, because, you know, after all, we're learning and development people, so we know everything about learning, don't we? No, we're still learning about learning. So yeah, let's not stereotype people.
Brilliant, great point. Somebody has asked, where should we start as L&D professionals to introduce learning in the flow of work? So if they're starting afresh, how would they go about doing that?
I don't mind jumping in. In terms of where you should start with anything, it's where you are. So, you know, David did laugh earlier. I always say start small, and I mean it, because if you go in big and bang, you know, it's just more risk, isn't it? Whereas I have this theory, it's called the make better cake theory. If we do something that's great, everyone wants a slice of it, everyone wants a bit of it. But, you know, you don't have to start with big fancy wedding cake, just make some cupcakes. Now, I'll get away from the food analogy in case anyone's hungry, but start small, do something, make one shift, and then monitor it, check it out. You know, Maureen's talked about evidence, David's talked about evidence, I've talked about evidence. Gather the evidence. We can learn a lot from our friends in the tech world, you know, who use Agile. And the idea behind that is iteration. So you do something, you monitor it, you look at it, what worked, what didn't work, and then you move on. So a practical example for learning in the flow of work could be an onboarding process. Every organization has an onboarding process, don't they? So how do you bring people in? And it might just be, for example, branding. Go and have a chat with your marketing team. What do you do about brand? How do you land the brand before people even start? Why do they want to come to you as an organization? And then you can leverage what your marketing department are doing in terms of branding for when people come in. It's just one tiny shift, you know, really focusing in on who are we, what do we stand for, what are our values? And then it's an easy audience. 6 weeks after they start, what do they remember? What did they experience in terms of branding? How do they feel that they belong? Of course, belonging is all part of psychological safety. Psychological safety is all part of good productivity. People feeling that they belong to an organization is a really important step. So just one practical idea, but you could work that through with everything, couldn't you? Any problem that you have, start with your evidence, start small, make one tiny tweak, but just monitor that. And then you can grow and make bigger and bigger cakes. And when you make great cake, everyone wants some of it. So yeah, I hope you're not too hungry.
That was a great analogy. Somebody has asked, how can knowledge retention be better implemented to on-the-job training? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? If you're learning on the go, things could possibly easily be forgotten. David?
It links with the micro comment. So 10% of people are doing are experimenting with microlearning. So yeah, if I go back a few years, I wanted to know how to do a pivot table. I had to put a pivot table in a report, and I had no idea how to do that. Yeah, I had to go on a advanced Excel course to do that. But the prerequisite for the advanced Excel course was the basic and the intermediate. So I had to go through 3 weeks of training to get to my pivot table. My about half a day on pivot tables, not even that. So yeah, I can just go on Microsoft's own website for free access to do a pivot table. So, you know, kind of it's what is the nub of what I wanted to know, and signpost people to that piece of information. brilliant microlearning. I can't remember anything else either side of what was on the pivot table because I just wanted to know the pivot table. So memory retention, microlearning, learning in the flow, it goes through the roof. And actually, because it's a small piece of learning, whether it's an info sheet, whether it's a video, whether it's something else, people will remember that. If you throw loads of content at people, of course, our brains are not designed to retain 5 days full of content being thrown at us. Yeah, it will go through the roof on small things that people can regularly access.
Brilliant. Michelle, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, when we think about retention, we retain what we need. Okay, so if you've learned to drive a car, until you've learned to drive a car, you might not even know what any of the controls are. Why would you need? You might have been a passenger for years and years, but you retain what you need, and that's part of the problem. We throw things at people that they just don't need. And this is one of the reasons why I'm a massive advocate for learning in the flow of work. That, you know, I mentioned Mexican food. I cook quite a lot. I couldn't tell you now necessarily how to cook that Mexican food, but I know where my recipe is. And that's kind of part of the issue, that we as L&Ders, we need to provide this space for going back to, you know, that website or that TED talk or whatever. People don't necessarily retain information anymore, particularly pivot tables. I mean, who does that anymore? I don't know, like once in a blue moon, unless it's your job and you're doing it day in, day out. You know, the same with the driving. If I'm doing it day in, day out, I know where all the controls are. Give me a new car and suddenly I'm a bit like, oh, and now I need to retain some new information. So we shouldn't perhaps get caught up on retention, but we should get caught up on sort of location or easy access for the, you know, the moment of need, rather than, you know, people talk about that just in case learning, you know, as opposed to just in time. So there's definitely a need for thinking about retention more broadly and why we need it.
Brilliant. And Maureen, did you have anything to add to that one?
Yes, definitely. I like the analogy with the car, actually, because you know, we provide roadside assistance, and how the training was built since until now is that we were actually training the new collaborators on a software regarding our contracts, and people didn't understand the sense of it. So during 3 weeks, they had all the functionalities of the software, how you do this and that and this and that and this and that during 3 weeks. So it was a lot. And people didn't understand why they were doing it. At the end of the 3 weeks, they were like, okay, I don't know what to do, actually. So now we are thinking about it in a different way, thinking about not of the software, but about, okay, I'm somebody who has a breakdown, and now I'm calling my insurance company, and I have somebody over the phone, and now this is where we start. Okay, if a person is on the phone, I start by opening the contract and asking these kind of questions, and concretely this kind of questions, you need these functionalities in the software. So this is the opposite way of taking it, giving sense.
Brilliant. Thank you all very much. We've just got time for a couple more questions from the audience. So if there's anything that you do really want to ask, then please do send it in. Someone's asked, besides on-the-job training, job aids and creating a knowledge base, what are other ways for learning in the flow of work? Anyone got anything to say to that, or is that it summed up?
I actually don't think it is it. Just to check, that was on the job training, creating knowledge. This is me and my retention. I have a pen. I'm writing. You know, this is how this works in the moment. What was it? On the job training and creating knowledge base.
And job aids, yeah.
I mean, ultimately, they're just 3 examples, aren't they? The answer here is, you know, as I think I mentioned earlier, it's the right solution for the right problem at the right time for the right people in the right way. So it could be anything, you know, it could be a peer-to-peer community of practice, for example, or it could be a weekly email from your CEO, or it depends what the problem is that you're trying to solve. And I would say nothing is off the table until, you know, you've worked through what your evidence says. And we've said a few times about evidence, and I really want to shout out the CIPD for this, because at the core of the CIPD profession map, there's purpose. And then around that core is evidence-based, outcomes-driven and principles-led. And I think that as a profession, we we can stand by that, and it helps answer this question. What is the purpose? Why are you having that conversation? Why is that learning a need? What is the purpose? Okay, well, what evidence do I have? What are the outcomes that I'm looking for? And what principles am I driving that by? And the principles might be accessible for everybody. It could be the principles of the values of your organization. It could be the principles wrapped around good learning design for adults, so nothing is off the table. It is definitely about looking for the right solution for the problem that you're trying to solve.
Brilliant, thank you. Somebody has said, can the panel shed more light on the difference between a learning management system and a learning experience platform, and how they have used either to create or nurture a culture of learning in the flow of work? David?
I was going to say, is this something in Maureen's domain?
Okay, let's go. So concretely, yes. Concretely, we have this learning management system that we chose, and we have so implemented in teams. So concretely, we are making training paths, and it's what I would say is that it's not a learning experience platform, because the learning is pushed by the trainers or by myself. It's not created by experts, but and that some of the modules are created by experts, but I'm actually putting them and generating them and putting them on the platform. Next step, of course, will be to have this other kind of a platform. The LMS, Learning Management System, is a great way of engaging people, because it's people can see their completion, people can see their scores, we can actually celebrate. I really like the way of this. Earlier we were talking about celebration. People can celebrate they have like a certification, diploma at the end. It's like they have a journey. When they arrive in the company, they have this onboarding journey, and then we will have different courses after, like more than onboarding, like specific courses. And because they are, we have a strong mobility politic at Optiven, we will also have trainings for their mobility and learning a new job. So this is how we're going to use the learning management system at Optiven.
Brilliant. And sticking with you, Maureen, someone said, you mentioned that you moved to Microsoft Teams, and they were wondering what specific tools on Teams are useful for learning resources.
Actually, we have integrated all the learning management system into Teams. This is how we use it. So we use Rise Up LMS. So it's definitely, it looks like it's one part, it's like an application that you have on the left-hand side of your Teams account, such that you have a conversation, you have your Teams, you have everything on we also have our intranet, for example, on the left-hand side of our screen. And when we click on that's like a little application, we open a window with same thing. We have a conversation, then we have our trainings. We also have reporting. So the managers have access to specific reporting for their own departments, because they have specific rights, which is great because the managers can follow what is done, what their team have done. And they can see, for example, what I would like them to do. So because it's the beginning with my objective that the managers look at the reporting, and if like the activity is a little bit low, they would say, okay, Michelle, you haven't completed the GDPR module. So here we have 5 minutes. So please do it before you go for lunch, for example. So this having a specific part for reporting for the managers is really interesting as well.
Brilliant.
To motivate.
Great. Okay, so probably our last audience question. Thank you all for sending them in, and if there's any we haven't got around to, we can try and answer those offline. Someone's asked, what are your views on action learning sets to share learning experiences and anchor learning? David?
Yeah, my view, they're priceless. They're absolutely priceless. So the cost of getting people together for an hour is a brilliant investment for people to be able to share their real world with each other, to bounce ideas off, to collaborate, to question, to challenge. It's priceless. Well worth the investment. Needs a bit of support to start with. Get people, links back to what Michelle said earlier about motivation. But yeah, you know, kind of for managers, we tend to recruit managers to be fixers. So putting a group of managers together to fix a particular issue, what's not to love about it? Yeah. Brilliant.
Great.
A brilliant thing. Yeah.
Can I add on that? Yeah, there's something quintessentially brilliant about people learning from people. Social learning, we've done it forever. You know, I have to talk about our you know, in the caves years and years ago, before electricity, when we all sat around the campfire, this is how we learn, you know, where the good berries were and how to catch the animals and all the rest of it. It's our innate nature, and it all comes from when we're born and we're told stories and we react with other people and we learn how to have conversations. When we put learning online without the function of people being able to talk to each other, there's something that gets lost. And this is one of the reasons why I said about learning management systems and LXPs. The difference largely is that one enables you to have content, but one enables you to have content and a discussion about content. So having a learning management system within teams, a place where you've got socialized learning, the ability to talk to each other, how wonderful is that? It means that people can make sense of it. So to just back up David's point, action learning sets are priceless because you're putting people together to be able to talk about things. But practically, just because you put people in a room together doesn't mean to say that they will talk to each other or they know what to talk about. So I would be cautious of just doing that. As an L&D professional doing that, you need to just have a little bit more around purpose, motivation, ensure there's psychological safety, that kind of background to set it up, and then they'll go. Does that make sense? You don't want to just kind of, it's that awkwardness of networking, isn't it? You know, you give somebody a glass of wine and a piece of cheese and go away, go network. This is so awkward. You don't want that. You want people to be able to go, well, this is, we had this learning. This is what we're talking about. This is why I like, you know, action learning sets with purpose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Maureen, do you have any final thoughts on that?
Right, this discussion is really interesting because it makes me think about how we are thinking about using it and what could be the next steps. Because I agree with Michelle, because now people in our company have access to this great learning management platform with training online and new trainings to come. But the thing is that we need to link it to social discussions as well. So this is something quite new, and really need to think how to put this as well in our learning. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
What a great example of Maureen learning in the flow of work in front of the audience. We could not have scripted that. That's priceless. Yeah.
Absolutely, that is brilliant. Okay, well, I am afraid that's all we've got time for today. It's been a brilliant discussion. So thank you all for asking questions, for getting involved in the poll. And as mentioned, if we didn't get around to answering your question, we will try to do that offline. And this session will also be available on demand once it's finished. So thank you to Maureen, David and Michelle for taking part. And to our audience for watching. We really appreciate it. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Rise Up, for partnering with us on this. If you'd like to find out more about how Rise Up can help you incorporate training into your workday and improve employee performance, you can visit their website, riseup.ai/EN. So thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.